My name is Theo Gonzalves. Welcome to Viral Histories, Stories of Racism, Resilience, and Resistance. We're exploring some of the voices from the Asian American community and their response to this global pandemic. Today we'll be talking with Max Leung, the founder of the San Francisco Peace Collective. He and his group have been conducting civilian patrols of that city's Chinatown, which is about 24 city blocks. My co-host for the series is Lintaro Donovan, who is a high school student in Maryland.
Hello America, break your backs for dollars, they don't carry ya. 7,000 miles away from home with language barriers, land of opportunity. Tell me, is it good to you? But
thank you, Max, for joining us. And what we'd like to do is to ask you, how did you start this idea? How did this idea of the Peace Collective get started?
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. The idea, actually, the idea started a few years ago because in San Francisco, there's been a history of violent attacks, against the Asian community, because the Asian community were often targeted for robberies and burglaries. So a few years ago, I had the idea of, just organizing the community, because I noticed that in the Asian American and in the Chinese community in San Francisco, there really wasn't an organization or a voice, a singular voice that was representative of the community. Because I've been involved in different activists and social justice groups in the past, and I've always noticed that other communities always had a voice, and they were organized. The Asian American community, there just, wasn't as strong a representation and voice, that I felt, that we should have. I mean, considering that San Francisco is like 30%, Asian American. It was kind of difficult at the time for me to spearhead such a project. I really needed, collective teamwork to make this happen, and it just seemed like nobody was interested. They would only be interested if somebody did all the work. And then a little over a month ago, once the shelter-in-place ordinance began, so I was on this Facebook group page, and this page was primarily about crimes against Asians. And I've been a member of that group for a while now. I would say like maybe 6 months at least. And membership in that group kind of hovered around, I think it was like maybe like 1,000 members in that group. And within a month's time, in this past month, membership shot up to over 30,000. So over 30,000 members. So yeah, so membership was growing like by like 1,000 people per day. And so a month ago, I'm just scrolling through that group, reading the different articles and that people were posting, because, recently there were, a lot of attacks again, in San Francisco, Chinatown. And some guy posted, "Hey, who's in San Francisco and wants to patrol Chinatown?" And so I replied to him. A few other people replied to this guy, and we decided that we were going to go out and patrol Chinatown like the very next day. So the very next day, just a handful of strangers who met, on social media, met up in Chinatown, and we started patrolling.
And these are folks that you didn't really know before, and it's become kind of its own community, isn't that right?
Yeah. It's been great, like friendships have been made. We've really gotten to know the Chinatown community a lot better as far as the merchants. We work closely with one of the merchants associations as well. And so really getting to know, and we've gotten to know a lot of the shopkeepers, on a first name basis. They recognize us now when we walk through the neighborhood. So yeah.
So Max, your organization is an activist organization, and you guys patrol and protect the Asian American, Chinese American community in San Francisco. So what sort of response has that evoked from the police force?
The San Francisco Police Department is very supportive of what we are doing. Whenever they have information that they feel, might be of use to us, they contact us and they'll let us know.
What is the vision that you have for Chinatown after this pandemic?
Pragmatically, it's worrisome for me, just because I know that after, this pandemic is over, and once things get back to normal or whatever, or the new normal, whatever that's going to look like, right. I know that things are not going to be returned to normal for the Asian American community or Asians, all across, the world who, might be living, elsewhere. Just because I know that there's still going to be so much xenophobia and discrimination and prejudice and hate and fear, of Asians. So I know that it's going to be a major, economic impact on Chinatown. And as far as public safety goes, that's something that I'm worried about too, because once people are out and about again, that just increases the likelihood and the chances of, bigots and racists and, people of xenophobia, attacking Asian Americans. So yeah, I'm worried about what things are going to look like moving forward into the future, because Asian Americans or Asians not only have to deal with the same fallouts as everyone else, but they have to deal with that extra added dynamic as well.
What can our viewers do to combat this fear, this xenophobia that might very well linger after the pandemic?
Education. Like educate people, let people know absolutely how absurd and nonsensical it is to point fingers or blame Asians for a virus. And also, I want everybody to be vigilant moving forward. It's not about living in fear, but just living in safety.
What is your vision for the San Francisco Peace Collective, and perhaps for a national peace collective once this pandemic is over? What role do you see your organization playing?
Like, my focus is just on San Francisco Chinatown at the moment. Because, like I said, I know that other people, in other parts of the country, they're organizing their own communities, and that, for me, that's all I want to see, for people to, wherever they may be, to organize themselves and to protect their own communities.
Well, thanks, Max. You've given us a lot to think about, and including the model that your group has put together, which oddly enough is about strangers coming together for a common cause.
It's been a long time coming, just because, in the Asian culture, we're often taught not to be vocal, not to stir the pot, just kind of turn the other cheek, keep your head down, work hard, become successful, mind your own business. And now now is not the time for that. It's time for a cultural shift. And I do see that happening now with the newer generation of Asian Americans, where we realize that, it's, we need to create and build communities, to take care of and to look out for one another, and to also have a voice, to speak up for ourselves, to defend ourselves, and no longer be apathetic, and no longer just worry about ourselves, because in the Asian community, you know, in the Asian culture, it's all about being successful, you know, and as we all know, there's no money in, you know, activism and volunteer work, so it's often frowned upon, you know, and we all have to remember that if it hadn't been for previous generations and ancestors who were activists and who made great sacrifices, like, we wouldn't have the privileges that we have today, you know, in society, in order to, you know, be successful, you know. So people had to fight and die for the freedoms that we have, you know, and so we can't forget that, you know, and so for future generations, you know, like, we have to do the same.
So thank you to Max Leung for joining us. He's the founder of the San Francisco Peace Collective, as well as our co-host, Lintaro Donovan. Please stay tuned for our live Q&A about this topic. It's happening at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, America. Break your backs for dollars, they don't carry ya. 7,000 miles away from home with language barriers. Land of opportunity. Tell me, is it good to you? But 6 feet deep on stolen land.